In dealing with the systems of property, it is important to understand that there is sometimes a grievous mistake in the conventional wisdom, which refers to property as an arbitrary constellation of rights and duties that therefore can be changed at will by the state because there's nothing of deep substance there. The correct view on this subject is exactly the opposite. If you're talking about a system of property that is acquired by a system of first possession, what you want to do is to make sure that the owner has a useful bundle of rights that permit for its maximum development and use. The current system is one of decentralized acquisition. People go out and they acquire a piece of land and mark its boundary lines, and then other people come, perhaps somewhat later in time, and they do the same thing. And slowly what happens is, if you look at the map, the vacant spots get filled in with individual pieces of ownership. So what you do on the map is you start with private possession, and then what you do is you develop the common elements, the streets, the highways, and the sewers, which allow you to link things together. That allows for integration to take place. You can now mine on the one hand, build foundations for your house on the other, and also build upwards so that you're not confined to simply a plain. There has always been a great question as to whether or not you're allowed to take as much land as you want. But in a state of nature, this tends not to be a problem, because if you try to make your land too extensive, you will not be able to defend it against wild animals. So what typically happens is that people choose land which gives them defensible borders. And so with respect to land, it has the following dimensions. Property has to be infinite duration, because if there's a time limit, you can never quite figure out when that time limit expires and what should be done after it expires. So infinite horizons essentially allow for development. Property is also in 3 dimensions, and so the first basic approximation is that he who owns the soil owns the depths and owns the air. Property which you cannot use is worthless, and so therefore the conventional uses of property for farming on the one hand, mining, and for building on the other are generally built into the basic common law definition of property rights. With respect to property, the basic rule is that prior in time is higher in right, so that those people who take possession first essentially are allowed to keep it against all subsequent takers. This means, in effect, that once the property rights are established, no individual is entitled to disrupt. And the basic rule on this is you may do with your property what you please, because you will gain from that particular use and other people's will not harm. But the major qualification on that should be instantly apparent, which is that you're never allowed to use your property in ways which make it impossible for other people to use theirs. And so what happens is the use of property, which is allowed in the first instance, is subject to a series of boundary constraints, namely that you're not allowed to commit nuisances against your neighbors. And then what happens is the property that you have is often in need of disposition. And what the basic rules provide for is that you can so divide that particular property that you have. And the way you can divide it is in a whole variety of arrangements. You can divide it by leases, you can divide it by life estates, you can divide it by mortgages. And the theory is, as you start to divide these particular interests, what happens is the gains from trade that you can have are greater than if the only choices you had were an outright ownership transfer on the one hand or no transfer at all. So divided interests in property are in fact the devices by which social gains start to take place.